In a small Florida courtroom, the air buzzed with tension as Judge Susan Leavitt sat poised behind her bench. The room was filled with the low hum of murmured conversations, the shuffle of papers, and the occasional creak of wooden chairs. Spectators leaned forward slightly, their eyes darting between the judge and the individuals at the center of the drama. At the heart of it all stood Michael Bondi, a well-known local attorney whose reputation for being outspoken and unyielding had earned him both admirers and critics. On this particular day, Bondi's fiery personality would collide head-on with Judge Leavitt's strict adherence to decorum, setting the stage for an unforgettable courtroom showdown. Bondi's presence in the courtroom wasn't unusual. He often represented clients embroiled in contentious legal battles. But today felt different. His client, a middle-aged man accused of minor misconduct, sat quietly beside him, seemingly unaware that the focus would soon shift entirely away from his case. As proceedings began, Bondi wasted no time addressing what he perceived as a grave injustice. He claimed that Judge Leavitt had made disparaging remarks about President Joe Biden during prior hearings, though these comments were not officially documented. To Bondi, this alleged insult was more than just a personal jab. It was evidence of bias, something he argued undermined the fairness of the judicial process. His voice grew louder as he pressed his point, demanding accountability and transparency. From the bench, Judge Leavitt listened intently at first, her expression unreadable. Known for her stern demeanor and no-nonsense approach, she rarely tolerated disruptions in her courtroom. Yet, she allowed Bondi to speak, perhaps curious about where his argument would lead. However, as his tone became increasingly accusatory, her patience began to wear thin. Her eyes narrowed slightly and her lips pressed together in a tight line. When Bondi refused to back down, continuing to challenge her impartiality, Judge Leavitt finally interjected. Her voice cut through the room like a knife, sharp and commanding, warning Bondi that his behavior bordered on contempt. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The once muted murmurs turned into complete silence as everyone braced for what might come. Next, for several tense moments, Bondi and Judge Leavitt locked eyes, each refusing to yield. Bondi's face flushed red, his jaw clenched tightly as he clutched his legal pad. He fired back with renewed vigor, accusing the judge of stifling free speech and attempting to silence dissent. His words reverberated through the courtroom, drawing nervous glances from spectators. Some sympathized with his passion, while others squirmed uncomfortably, sensing that things were spiraling out of control. Judge Leavitt, however, remained unfazed. With practiced calm, she reminded Bondi of the rules governing courtroom conduct, emphasizing that respect and professionalism were non-negotiable. Her tone left little room for interpretation. She viewed his actions as a direct affront to her authority. As the confrontation escalated, Judge Leavitt reached a breaking point. Slamming her gavel down with startling force, she declared Bondi's behavior contemptuous and disruptive. In one swift motion, she imposed a staggering $100,000 fine, citing his inflammatory accusations and refusal to adhere to basic decorum. The sound of the gavel striking wood echoed like thunder, punctuating her decision with finality. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by hushed whispers as people struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Such a hefty penalty was unprecedented in this courthouse, and its sudden imposition sent shockwaves throughout the room. Bondi froze momentarily, his pen slipping from his fingers onto the table. Then, almost instinctively, he erupted into protest, his voice rising above the growing din. The tension in the courtroom reached a fever pitch as Bondi continued to push back against the judge's ruling. He accused her of overstepping her bounds, claiming that her decision was politically motivated and violated his rights. His colleagues seated nearby exchanged uneasy glances, torn between supporting their peer and maintaining composure in such a charged environment. Meanwhile, Judge Leavitt sat rigidly, her gaze unwavering as she absorbed Bondi's tirade. For 7 agonizing minutes, the verbal sparring continued, neither side willing to concede ground. The bailiffs stationed near the door shifted uncomfortably, their hands resting lightly on their belts as if anticipating further escalation. It was clear that the situation was teetering on the edge of chaos. Then, without warning, Judge Leavitt raised her hand for silence. The room fell eerily quiet as all eyes turned toward her. With measured precision, she instructed the bailiffs to take action. "Cuff him," she commanded, her voice steady but laced with authority. The order hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. Bondi's protest faltered for a split second before resuming with even greater intensity. But the bailiffs moved swiftly, closing the distance between themselves and the defiant lawyer. Despite his objections and attempts to resist, they secured handcuffs around his wrists, eliciting audible gasps from the crowd. Bondi's face twisted in a mixture of anger and disbelief as he was led away, leaving behind a stunned courtroom still grappling with the surreal turn of events. Outside the courthouse, news of the dramatic scene spread like wildfire. Reporters rushed to interview witnesses, eager to piece together the details of what had transpired inside. Social media platforms exploded with reactions, ranging from outrage to amusement, depending on individual perspectives. Supporters of Vioer, Judge Leavitt praised her for standing firm against disrespect, arguing that her actions reinforced the importance of maintaining order and decorum in the judicial system. Critics, however, condemned her ruling as excessive and authoritarian, claiming it set a dangerous precedent for silencing opposing viewpoints. Meanwhile, Bondi's allies rallied around him, vowing to appeal the fine and contest the legality of his arrest. They framed the incident as a battle for free speech and due process, igniting heated debates across the community. Back in the courtroom, after the initial commotion subsided, Judge Leavitt addressed the remaining attendees. She spoke calmly, but firmly, reiterating her commitment to upholding professionalism and respect within her domain. Her words carried weight, reminding everyone present that the pursuit of justice required discipline and impartiality. She acknowledged the controversy surrounding her decision, but stood by it unequivocally, confident that her actions served the greater purpose of preserving the integrity of the legal system. Though the backlash outside simmered, she remained resolute, undeterred by the storm brewing beyond the courthouse walls. In the days that followed, the incident dominated conversations far beyond the confines of the courtroom. Lawyers debated whether Bondi's punishment was proportionate to his offense, while citizens grappled with broader questions about the limits of judicial authority. Legal experts weighed in, offering contrasting analyses of the situation. Some viewed it as a cautionary tale about the importance of civility in public forums, while others saw it as a potential overreach of power. Regardless of where people stood, one thing was undeniable. Judge Leavitt and Bondi had ignited a firestorm that showed no signs of abating anytime soon. Their clash served as both a spectacle and a sobering reminder of the delicate balance required in matters of law and morality. The courtroom drama between Judge Susan Leavitt and attorney Michael Bondi quickly became the talk of the town. People gathered in coffee shops, offices, and parks to discuss the shocking events that unfolded within those walls. Some recounted the story with wide-eyed disbelief, while others debated passionately about who was right or wrong. For many, it wasn't just a legal matter, it was a moral dilemma that forced them to examine their own beliefs about authority, free speech, and fairness. The incident had struck a nerve, sparking conversations that went far beyond the confines of the courthouse. Bondi's supporters wasted no time rallying behind him, portraying him as a victim of judicial overreach. They argued that his accusations against Judge Leavitt were valid and that her response was disproportionate and punitive. Social media posts flooded timelines, some calling for protests outside the courthouse, while others demanded an investigation into Judge Leavitt's conduct. A small group of lawyers even began drafting a formal complaint, hoping to challenge the legality of both the $100,000 fine and Bondi's arrest. Their efforts gained traction online, drawing attention from national news outlets and turning what started as a local dispute into a nationwide debate. On the other side of the spectrum, Judge Leavitt found herself with a strong base of defenders. Many praised her decisiveness, viewing her actions as necessary to maintain order in a system often plagued by disrespect and chaos. Supporters pointed out that judges had a duty to enforce rules and ensure decorum, especially when attorneys crossed professional boundaries. To them, Bondi's behavior was reckless and disrespectful, deserving of consequences. Letters of support poured into the courthouse, thanking Judge Leavitt for standing firm against what they saw as an attempt to undermine her authority. Her colleagues on the bench privately commended her courage, though few were willing to comment publicly given the controversy surrounding the case. As the days passed, the media played a pivotal role in shaping public opinion. News anchors dissected every detail of the courtroom confrontation, replaying grainy footage captured by courtroom cameras. Legal analysts appeared on television panels, offering conflicting interpretations of the judge's ruling and its implications. Some argued that Judge Leavitt had acted within her rights, citing precedents where similar fines had been imposed for contempt. Others expressed concern about the chilling effect such penalties might have on attorneys trying to advocate zealously for their clients. The debate grew heated, with commentators interrupting each other mid-sentence and viewers calling in to share their thoughts. Meanwhile, Michael Bondi remained at the center of the storm. After posting bail, he emerged from his brief detention determined to fight back. Sitting down for interviews with major networks, he painted himself as a crusader for justice, someone willing to risk everything to expose corruption and bias in the legal system. His charisma shone through during these appearances, captivating audiences who hung on to his every word. He accused Judge Leavitt of harboring political biases, insisting that her remarks about President Biden were proof of her inability to remain impartial. Bondi vowed to take the matter all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary, framing his battle as one not just for himself, but for the principles of democracy and free expression. Despite his confident demeanor in front of the cameras, Bondi faced mounting pressure behind the scenes. Colleagues within the legal community began questioning whether his aggressive tactics had gone too far this time. While some admired his boldness, others worried that his actions could tarnish the reputation of the profession as a whole. Clients hesitated to hire him, fearing association with someone embroiled in such high-profile controversy. Even close friends urged him to consider settling the matter quietly rather than dragging it further into the spotlight. But Bondi refused to back down, convinced that surrendering now would only validate what he saw as an abuse of power. In contrast, Judge Leavitt retreated from the public eye, choosing instead to focus on her duties within the courtroom. She resumed presiding over cases, her composure unwavering despite the scrutiny swirling around her. Court staff noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. She seemed more deliberate, almost cautious, as if aware that every decision she made might be scrutinized under a microscope. Yet she continued to uphold her strict standards, refusing to let external pressures dictate how she ran her courtroom. Privately, she confided in trusted colleagues, expressing frustration over how the situation had spiraled out of control. Still, she maintained that she had done nothing wrong and stood by her actions without hesitation. For the general public, the saga raised important questions about the balance of power in the legal system. Was it acceptable for judges to impose such hefty fines for perceived disrespect? Did attorneys have the right to call out potential biases, even if it meant disrupting proceedings? These questions lingered in people's minds, prompting spirited discussions at dinner tables and community forums. Parents used the story as a teaching moment, explaining to their children why respecting authority mattered, while also encouraging critical thinking about fairness and accountability. Teachers incorporated the case into classroom debates, challenging students to weigh the pros and cons of each side's arguments. Amidst the chaos, there were moments of levity. Memes mocking the courtroom drama flooded social media, with captions ranging from humorous to biting. Late-night comedians poked fun at the absurdity of the situation, using exaggerated impressions of Bondi and Judge Leavitt to entertain audiences. One sketch featured a mock reenactment of the handcuffing scene, complete with dramatic music and slow-motion effects. Despite the humor, however, the underlying issues remained serious, underscoring the complexities of navigating justice in a polarized society. As weeks turned into months, the legal battle dragged on, consuming significant resources on both sides. Bondi filed multiple motions, appealing the fine and seeking to overturn his arrest. Each filing sparked renewed interest in the case, keeping it alive in the headlines. Meanwhile, Judge Leavitt cooperated fully with any investigations, confident that her decisions would hold up under scrutiny. The appellate court reviewing the case faced immense pressure, knowing that its ruling could set a precedent affecting future courtroom dynamics. Lawyers across the country watched closely, eager to see how higher courts would interpret the intersection of free speech, judicial authority, and courtroom conduct. Outside the legal arena, the ripple effects of the incident continued to manifest. Law schools integrated the case into their curriculum, using it as a real-world example of ethical dilemmas faced by practitioners. Students debated whether Bondi's approach was justified, or if Judge Leavitt's response was warranted. Professors encouraged open dialogue, reminding students that the law was not black and white, but rather a living entity shaped by human interaction. The case served as a reminder that practicing law required not only technical skill, but also emotional intelligence and adaptability. Back in Florida, life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a spectacle. The courthouse resumed its routine operations, though whispers of the infamous showdown lingered in hallways and break rooms. Spectators attending trials occasionally glanced toward the bench, wondering if another eruption might occur. For Judge Leavitt, the experience reinforced her belief in the importance of steadfastness, even in the face of adversity. For Bondi, it solidified his resolve to challenge systems he viewed as unjust, regardless of personal cost. And for everyone else, it became a story told and retold, a testament to the enduring tension between authority and advocacy in the pursuit of justice. As the legal battle between Judge Susan Leavitt and attorney Michael Bondi stretched on, the ripple effects of their clash began to permeate deeper into society. What started as a courtroom confrontation had evolved into something much larger, a reflection of broader societal divisions. People from all walks of life weighed in, bringing their own perspectives shaped by personal experiences and political beliefs. For some, the incident symbolized the erosion of respect for authority. For others, it highlighted the dangers of unchecked power. The debate raged on, fueled by passionate opinions that refused to fade away. In the months following the dramatic scene, local community groups organized town hall meetings to discuss the implications of the case. These gatherings drew crowds ranging from concerned citizens to seasoned activists, each eager to voice their thoughts. At one such meeting, an elderly man stood up, clutching a newspaper clipping about the incident. He spoke passionately about how judges like Leavitt were essential to maintaining order in an increasingly chaotic world. "We need leaders who aren't afraid to stand firm," he declared, his voice trembling with conviction. Others nodded in agreement, applauding his words, but not everyone shared his sentiment. A young woman seated near the back raised her hand, waiting patiently for her turn to speak. When called upon, she argued that Bondi's actions represented a necessary challenge to systems that often silence dissenting voices. Her argument sparked a lively exchange, with participants debating whether justice required strict enforcement or room for questioning authority. Meanwhile, the media continued to play a central role in shaping public perception. Documentaries and podcasts emerged, dissecting every detail of the courtroom drama. Journalists interviewed experts, witnesses, and even former clients of both Judge Leavitt and Bondi, piecing together a narrative that went beyond headlines. One documentary titled Order in the Court explored the psychological dynamics at play during the confrontation, featuring commentary from behavioral scientists who analyzed body language and tone. Another podcast, hosted by a popular legal commentator, delved into historical cases involving judicial contempt rulings, drawing parallels between past incidents and the current saga. These projects kept the story alive, ensuring it remained fresh in people's minds long after the initial shock had worn off. For Michael Bondi, the prolonged attention brought both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, he became a household name, recognized wherever he went. Strangers approached him in grocery stores and coffee shops, offering words of encouragement or criticism depending on their stance. Some praised him as a hero willing to risk everything for truth and transparency, while others dismissed him as reckless and self-serving. Despite the mixed reactions, Bondi embraced his newfound visibility, using it to build a platform for advocacy. He launched a series of public lectures, traveling across the country to share his views on judicial reform and free speech. His talks attracted large audiences, many of whom left feeling inspired or infuriated by his unapologetic candor. Yet, beneath the surface, Bondi grappled with the toll the ordeal was taking on his personal life. Friends noticed changes in him. He seemed more guarded, less inclined to laugh at jokes or engage in casual banter. Nights spent poring over legal documents and strategizing with his team left little time for relaxation. His family grew increasingly worried, urging him to step back and prioritize his well-being. But Bondi couldn't bring himself to let go. To him, this wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about proving a point. Every setback only strengthened his resolve, fueling his determination to see the fight through to the end. Judge Leavitt, too, faced her own struggles in the wake of the controversy. Though outwardly composed, she admitted privately to close friends that the relentless scrutiny weighed heavily on her. She found herself second-guessing decisions she once made confidently, questioning whether she could have handled things differently. The stress manifested in small ways: sleepless nights, moments of irritability, and a growing reluctance to engage in social settings. Yet she refused to allow these feelings to dictate her actions. Instead, she channeled her energy into mentoring younger judges, sharing lessons learned from her decades-long career. Her goal was simple: to equip the next generation with tools to navigate similar challenges without compromising integrity. The legal proceedings themselves moved at a glacial pace, bogged down by procedural hurdles and endless filings. Each motion submitted by Bondi triggered a flurry of responses from Judge Leavitt's legal team, resulting in stacks of paperwork that threatened to overwhelm court clerks. Hearings were scheduled, postponed, and rescheduled again, leaving both parties frustrated and weary. Observers noted the irony of a case centered on courtroom efficiency, becoming mired in bureaucratic delays. Still, neither side showed signs of backing down. Bondi doubled down on his appeals, arguing that the fine violated constitutional protections, while Judge Leavitt's representatives countered that her actions fell squarely within established legal frameworks. Amidst the chaos, unexpected alliances began to form. Lawyers who had previously been indifferent to Bondi's plight started speaking out in support of his right to question judicial conduct. They emphasized that attorneys played a crucial role in holding judges accountable, ensuring fairness for all parties involved. Similarly, some critics of Judge Leavitt softened their stance, acknowledging the difficulty of making split-second decisions under immense pressure. These shifts signaled a gradual move toward nuance, as people began recognizing the complexities inherent in the situation. On a national level, the case prompted discussions about reforming contempt laws. Legislators introduced bills aimed at clarifying guidelines for fines and penalties, hoping to prevent future disputes from spiraling out of control. Legal scholars debated the merits of these proposals, weighing potential benefits against unintended consequences. Some argued that clearer rules would protect judges from frivolous challenges, while others feared they might stifle legitimate critiques. The conversation extended beyond lawmakers, reaching classrooms, boardrooms, and living rooms, where ordinary citizens wrestled with what kind of legal system they wanted to live under. Back in Florida, the courthouse itself underwent subtle changes. Security measures tightened, with additional bailiffs stationed in key areas to deter disruptions. Signs reminding visitors of proper courtroom etiquette appeared near entrances, reinforcing expectations for behavior. Inside, staff members whispered about the impact the incident had on morale, noting a mix of tension and camaraderie among colleagues. Some felt proud to work in a place where principles were defended fiercely, while others worried about being caught in the crossfire of another high-profile showdown. As time passed, the story took on mythic proportions, retold with varying degrees of accuracy. School children heard simplified versions during civics lessons, learning about the importance of respecting authority while exercising critical thinking. Adults swapped exaggerated accounts at parties, embellishing details for dramatic effect. Even fictional adaptations began cropping up, with authors weaving elements of the case into novels and screenplays. Through it all, the core themes of power, accountability, and justice remained constant, resonating deeply with audiences. Ultimately, the legacy of the courtroom clash transcended its original context, becoming a touchstone for conversations about democracy and governance. It reminded people that institutions thrived when individuals held them accountable, but also that accountability required mutual respect and understanding. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale or a rallying cry, the saga of Judge Leavitt and Bondi underscored the enduring complexity of balancing authority with advocacy, a challenge that would continue to shape societies for generations to come. The courtroom drama between Judge Susan Leavitt and attorney Michael Bondi had become so deeply ingrained in public consciousness that it seemed to transcend its origins. It was no longer just a legal battle. It was a cultural moment, one that people referenced casually in everyday conversations. The story found its way into classrooms, workplaces, and even family dinners, where debates about right and wrong often stretched late into the night. For many, it served as a lens through which they examined their own values and beliefs about fairness, authority, and justice. As months turned into years, the case became less about the individuals involved and more about what it represented. The tension between tradition and change, order and dissent. In the legal community, the fallout from the incident prompted introspection. Law firms across the country began hosting workshops focused on courtroom etiquette and conflict resolution. Senior partners reminded junior associates of the importance of professionalism, warning them against crossing lines that could jeopardize their careers, or worse, undermine public trust in the judiciary. Yet there was also a growing acknowledgement that rigid adherence to decorum sometimes stifled necessary dialogue. Younger attorneys, inspired by Bondi's boldness, started pushing boundaries in subtle ways, challenging outdated norms without risking outright confrontation. This generational shift sparked heated discussions among colleagues, with older lawyers accusing the younger ones of being too idealistic, while the latter accused their mentors of complacency. Meanwhile, Michael Bondi continued to navigate the complexities of his newfound fame. Though he remained steadfast in his mission to overturn Judge Leavitt's ruling, the constant spotlight took a toll on him. He grew weary of the endless interviews, court appearances, and public speaking engagements. At times, he wondered if the fight was worth it. Late at night, sitting alone in his office surrounded by stacks of legal briefs, he questioned whether his crusade for accountability had overshadowed the very principles he sought to defend. Was he fighting for justice or merely seeking vindication? Despite these doubts, Bondi couldn't bring himself to walk away. To do so would feel like admitting defeat, not just to Judge Leavitt but to the system itself. Judge Leavitt, on the other hand, adopted a quieter approach. She avoided media appearances and declined invitations to comment on the ongoing legal proceedings. Instead, she poured her energy into mentoring aspiring judges and lawyers, emphasizing the importance of integrity and impartiality. Her lectures were well received, drawing standing ovations from audiences eager to learn from someone who had weathered such a storm. But behind closed doors, she wrestled with lingering questions about her decision that fateful day. Had she acted too harshly? Could she have handled Bondi differently without compromising her authority? These thoughts haunted her, though she never let them show in public. As the appellate process dragged on, the legal teams on both sides faced mounting pressure. Bondi's attorneys worked tirelessly to craft arguments that would appeal to higher courts, poring over precedents and statutes in search of loopholes. They filed motion after motion, each one met with counter-arguments from Judge Leavitt's team. The back and forth created a sense of déjà vu, as if the two parties were trapped in an endless loop. Observers noted the irony of a case centered on judicial efficiency becoming bogged down in procedural delays. Some joked that the only winners in this scenario were the printers supplying reams of paper for the endless filings. Outside the courtroom, the debate raged on. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags supporting either Bondi or Leavitt, turning the case into a digital battleground. Memes mocking the situation proliferated, alongside heartfelt posts from supporters on both sides. One viral video featured a comedian impersonating Bondi, complete with exaggerated gestures and impassioned speeches. while another depicted Judge Leavitt as a no-nonsense superhero doling out justice. While humor provided a temporary reprieve from the seriousness of the issue, it also highlighted how deeply embedded the story had become in popular culture. Amidst the noise, unexpected voices emerged. Former clients of Bondi spoke up, sharing stories of how his dedication had changed their lives. One woman recounted how he had fought tirelessly to clear her name after she was wrongfully accused of embezzlement. "He didn't care about the risks," she said during an interview. "All he cared about was making sure I got a fair shot." Similarly, retired judges came forward to praise Leavitt's commitment to upholding standards, recalling instances where her decisions had saved cases from descending into chaos. These testimonials added layers of nuance to the narrative, reminding people that neither Bondi nor Leavitt could be reduced to caricatures. The prolonged detention also inspired creative interpretations of the case. Playwrights penned scripts, imagining alternate endings, exploring what might have happened if Bondi and Leavitt had chosen different paths. Filmmakers developed documentaries blending fact and fiction, using dramatic reenactments to capture the emotional intensity of the courtroom showdown. Artists created paintings and sculptures symbolizing the clash of ideals, with some portraying Bondi as a defiant rebel and others depicting Leavitt as a stoic guardian of law. Through these artistic expressions, the story evolved beyond its factual roots, taking on new meanings depending on who told it. Back in Florida, life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be under the circumstances. The courthouse resumed its routine operations, though whispers of the infamous incident lingered in hallways and break rooms. New judges presiding over cases occasionally glanced nervously toward the gallery, wondering if history might repeat itself. Court staff exchanged knowing looks whenever tempers flared during hearings, silently acknowledging the shadow cast by Bondi and Leavitt's confrontation. Yet, despite the unease, there was a shared understanding that the event had sparked important conversations about the need for balance in the pursuit of justice. For Bondi supporters, the case became a rallying cry for reform. Activist groups used it as a springboard to advocate for greater transparency in the judicial system, organizing rallies and petitions demanding changes to contempt laws. Their efforts gained traction, drawing endorsements from prominent figures in politics and academia. Meanwhile, Judge Leavitt's defenders emphasized the importance of preserving judicial independence, arguing that undermining a judge's authority would set a dangerous precedent. Both camps dug in their heels, unwilling to compromise, ensuring that the debate remained as polarized as ever. Despite the division, there were moments of reconciliation. A local nonprofit invited Bondi and Leavitt to participate in a panel discussion aimed at fostering dialogue between opposing viewpoints. Neither accepted the invitation, citing scheduling conflicts and ongoing legal obligations. However, their absence did little to dampen enthusiasm for the event, which drew a diverse crowd eager to engage in constructive conversation. Participants shared personal anecdotes, debated policy proposals, and brainstormed solutions to bridge the gap between accountability and respect. By the end of the evening, attendees left feeling hopeful that common ground could be found, even if Bondi and Leavitt themselves weren't ready to meet halfway. Years later, when the final ruling was handed down, it came as a bittersweet conclusion to a saga that had consumed so much time and energy. The appellate court upheld Judge Leavitt's decision, affirming her authority to impose fines for contempt, but reducing the amount significantly. The handcuffing incident was deemed excessive, prompting calls for revised guidelines on the use of force in courtrooms. Both sides claimed partial victory, though neither walked away fully satisfied. Bondi vowed to continue advocating for reform, while Leavitt expressed gratitude for the opportunity to reflect on her role in shaping the future of the judiciary. What lingered long after the verdict was the realization that the true impact of the case lay not in its outcome but in the conversations it sparked. People learned to grapple with uncomfortable truths, recognizing that justice required not just adherence to rules, but also empathy and adaptability. The courtroom clash between Bondi and Leavitt may have ended, but its legacy endured, a testament to the enduring struggle to balance authority with advocacy in the pursuit of a fairer society. The final ruling in the case between Judge Susan Leavitt and attorney Michael Bondi brought a sense of closure, but it did little to quell the lingering questions about justice, authority, and fairness. The appellate court's decision to uphold Judge Leavitt's authority while reducing the fine sent mixed signals, leaving both supporters and critics divided over whether the outcome represented progress or regression. For many, the verdict was less important than the broader implications it carried, implications that would shape how future generations viewed the delicate balance between respecting authority and challenging it. In the weeks following the ruling, media coverage shifted from sensationalism to reflection. Journalists who had once focused on dramatic courtroom moments now turned their attention to the human stories behind the headlines. They interviewed everyday citizens whose lives had been touched by the legal system, asking them what they thought about the case and its aftermath. A single mother shared how she admired Bondi's courage in standing up to a judge, even though she disagreed with his methods. A retired teacher praised Judge Leavitt for her unwavering commitment to maintaining order, emphasizing that rules existed for a reason. These personal perspectives added depth to the narrative, reminding people that the law wasn't just an abstract concept, it affected real lives every day. For Michael Bondi, the reduced fine felt like a hollow victory. While he appreciated the acknowledgement that the original penalty had been excessive, he couldn't shake the feeling that the core issue remained unresolved. He believed that judges should be held accountable for their words and actions, especially when those actions impacted public perception of fairness. In interviews, he reiterated his stance, saying, "This isn't about me versus Judge Leavitt. It's about ensuring that everyone, no matter who they are, feels confident in the integrity of our courts." His determination inspired some, but others saw his refusal to let go as stubbornness, questioning whether his pursuit of accountability had become more about ego than principle. Judge Leavitt, too, faced continued scrutiny despite the affirmation of her authority. Critics argued that her decision to have Bondi handcuffed undermined her credibility, suggesting that such extreme measures only fueled distrust in the judiciary. Supporters countered that she had acted within her rights, pointing out that maintaining decorum was essential to preserving the rule of law. For her part, Judge Leavitt chose not to engage in public debates about the matter. Instead, she focused on mentoring young lawyers and judges, sharing insights gained from decades of experience. Her message was clear. The legal system relied on mutual respect, and breaking that trust came with consequences. As time passed, the case began to take on new dimensions. Academics wrote papers analyzing its impact on contempt laws, arguing that the incident highlighted gaps in existing regulations. Law students studied it as a cautionary tale, debating whether stricter guidelines were needed to prevent similar confrontations in the future. Some proposed reforms aimed at creating clearer boundaries for acceptable behavior in courtrooms, while others advocated for increased transparency in judicial proceedings. These discussions extended beyond academic circles, reaching policymakers and advocacy groups eager to address systemic issues exposed by the controversy. Meanwhile, popular culture continued to draw inspiration from the courtroom drama. Television shows featured episodes loosely based on the events, blending fact with fiction to explore themes of power and morality. Musicians penned songs capturing the emotional intensity of the clash, with lyrics ranging from defiant anthems to introspective ballads. Artists created murals depicting Bondi and Leavitt as symbols of opposing forces: freedom versus structure, rebellion versus tradition. Each interpretation added a layer of meaning to the story, transforming it into something larger than life. Back in Florida, the courthouse where the confrontation took place underwent subtle changes. Security protocols tightened further, with additional cameras installed and staff trained to handle potential disruptions. Signs reminding visitors of proper conduct became more prominent, reinforcing expectations for behavior. Yet, beneath these practical adjustments lay a deeper shift, a recognition that the courtroom was not just a physical space, but a microcosm of society itself. Judges presiding over cases adopted a more measured approach, mindful of the delicate balance between enforcing rules and fostering open dialogue. For Bondi's family, the prolonged battle took an emotional toll. His wife confided in friends about the strain it placed on their marriage, describing late-night arguments and missed anniversaries. Their children grew accustomed to seeing their father on television, often struggling to reconcile the public figure with the man they knew at home. Despite these challenges, they stood by him, believing in the importance of his mission. At the same time, Judge Leavitt's family grappled with their own struggles. Her adult children expressed pride in her accomplishments but worried about the stress she endured. They encouraged her to step back from the spotlight, urging her to prioritize self-care after years of relentless dedication. The legal community remained deeply divided over the case's legacy. Some hailed it as a turning point, arguing that it forced long-overdue conversations about accountability and reform. Others dismissed it as a distraction, claiming it detracted from more pressing issues facing the judiciary. Debates raged in conference rooms and online forums, with attorneys weighing in on everything from courtroom etiquette to the role of free speech in legal advocacy. Younger lawyers, in particular, found themselves torn between admiration for Bondi's boldness and respect for Leavitt's discipline, unsure which path to follow in their own careers. Amidst the polarization, unexpected bridges began to form. Community leaders organized dialogues aimed at finding common ground, bringing together individuals from opposing sides to discuss shared values. These gatherings fostered empathy, encouraging participants to listen without judgment and seek solutions rather than assign blame. One such event culminated in a joint statement calling for collaborative efforts to improve the legal system, signed by prominent figures from both camps. Though symbolic, the gesture signaled a willingness to move forward together, a small but significant step toward healing. Years later, the case remained a touchstone for discussions about justice and morality. Law schools included it in their curricula, using it as a case study to teach students about the complexities of navigating ethical dilemmas. Writers referenced it in essays exploring the intersection of law and society, highlighting its relevance to contemporary debates. Even casual conversations occasionally circled back to the courtroom showdown, with people recalling specific details or sharing anecdotes passed down through generations. Through it all, the story retained its power to provoke thought and spark meaningful dialogue. What ultimately emerged from the saga was a renewed appreciation for the fragility of trust in institutions. People realized that justice required not only adherence to rules but also compassion, humility, and adaptability. The confrontation between Bondi and Leavitt served as a reminder that no system was perfect, but also that imperfections could be addressed through honest reflection and collective effort. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale or a catalyst for change, the case underscored the enduring challenge of balancing authority with advocacy in the pursuit of a fairer society. And though the players moved on with their lives, the lessons they left behind continued to resonate, shaping the way people thought about justice for years to come. As the years rolled on, the courtroom drama between Judge Susan Leavitt and attorney Michael Bondi gradually faded from the front pages of newspapers and the lead stories on television. Yet, its echoes continued to reverberate through society, shaping conversations about authority, fairness, and accountability in ways that no one could have predicted. What had started as a clash between two strong-willed individuals evolved into a cultural touchstone, a lens through which people examined their own beliefs about justice and morality. The case became less about Bondi or Leavitt themselves and more about what they represented, the tension between tradition and progress, order and dissent. For Michael Bondi, life after the ruling was a mix of triumph and frustration. Though he had been vindicated to some extent by the appellate court's decision to reduce the fine, the fact that his central argument, that judges should be held accountable for perceived biases, remained unresolved, left him restless. He threw himself into advocacy work, traveling across the country to speak at conferences, universities, and community forums. His speeches often began with a recounting of the infamous courtroom incident, but he quickly shifted focus to broader issues like judicial transparency and reform. Audiences were captivated by his passion, though not everyone agreed with his methods. Some hailed him as a champion of free speech, while others dismissed him as overly confrontational. Despite the criticism, Bondi refused to soften his stance, believing that challenging authority was essential to preserving democracy. Bondi's relentless energy, however, came at a cost. Friends noticed that he seemed perpetually exhausted, his once sharp wit dulled by the weight of his mission. Late nights spent drafting legal briefs and strategizing with allies took a toll on his health, and his family grew increasingly concerned. His wife, who had supported him through thick and thin, began urging him to take breaks, reminding him that even the most dedicated crusaders needed rest. Their children, now teenagers, struggled to understand why their father remained so consumed by a case that had concluded years ago. At dinner tables, they would ask questions about fairness and justice, only to receive answers tinged with frustration. Still, Bondi pressed on, convinced that giving up would mean betraying everything he stood for. Judge Leavitt, meanwhile, embraced a quieter existence. After retiring from the bench, she dedicated herself to mentoring young lawyers and judges, sharing wisdom gleaned from decades of experience. Her lectures were well attended, drawing crowds eager to learn from someone who had faced one of the most publicized controversies in recent legal history. She spoke candidly about the challenges of making difficult decisions under pressure, emphasizing the importance of integrity and impartiality. Yet, there were moments when her composure faltered, revealing glimpses of vulnerability. In private conversations, she admitted to friends that the incident had left scars, reminders of how quickly trust could erode when power dynamics were called into question. The legacy of the case extended beyond the individuals involved, influencing how courts operated across the nation. Lawmakers introduced bills aimed at clarifying guidelines for contempt rulings, hoping to prevent similar disputes from spiraling out of control. Judges began receiving additional training on conflict resolution, learning techniques to de-escalate tense situations before they reached a breaking point. Courtrooms implemented subtle changes, such as clearer signage outlining expected behavior and improved communication channels for addressing grievances. These adjustments reflected a growing recognition that maintaining order required not just strict enforcement but also empathy and understanding. In the public sphere, the debate over the case's implications showed no signs of abating. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags supporting either Bondi or Leavitt, turning the story into a digital battleground that spanned generations. Young activists used the incident to highlight systemic flaws in the legal system, organizing protests and campaigns demanding greater transparency. Older citizens, meanwhile, expressed nostalgia for what they saw as a bygone era of respect for authority, lamenting the erosion of decorum in modern society. These contrasting viewpoints underscored the complexity of the issue, reminding people that there were no easy answers when it came to balancing competing values. Artists and creators continued to draw inspiration from the courtroom showdown, weaving elements of the story into their work. Filmmakers produced documentaries exploring different perspectives on the case, blending interviews with dramatizations to capture its emotional intensity. Playwrights staged productions imagining alternate outcomes, prompting audiences to reflect on what might have happened if Bondi and Leavitt had chosen different paths. Musicians composed songs capturing the raw emotions of the confrontation, with lyrics ranging from defiant anthems to introspective ballads. Each artistic interpretation added layers of meaning to the narrative, transforming it into something timeless and universal. Back in Florida, the courthouse where the incident occurred underwent further transformations. Security measures tightened even more, with advanced technology installed to monitor activity and prevent disruptions. Staff members received training on handling conflicts diplomatically, ensuring that tensions didn't escalate unnecessarily. Yet beneath these practical changes lay a deeper shift, a renewed commitment to fostering an environment of mutual respect. Judges presiding over cases adopted a more measured approach, mindful of the delicate balance between enforcing rules and encouraging open dialogue. Visitors entering the building couldn't help but notice how much quieter and calmer the atmosphere felt, compared to years past. For Bondi supporters, the case became a rallying cry for reform. Activist groups used it as a springboard to advocate for changes in the legal system, organizing rallies and petitions calling for greater accountability. Their efforts gained traction, drawing endorsements from prominent figures in politics and academia. Meanwhile, Judge Leavitt's defenders emphasized the importance of preserving judicial independence, arguing that undermining a judge's authority would set a dangerous precedent. Both camps dug in their heels, unwilling to compromise, ensuring that the debate remained as polarized as ever. Despite the division, there were moments of reconciliation. A local nonprofit invited Bondi and Leavitt to participate in a panel discussion aimed at fostering dialogue between opposing viewpoints. Neither accepted the invitation, citing scheduling conflicts and ongoing commitments. However, their absence did little to dampen enthusiasm for the event, which drew a diverse crowd eager to engage in constructive conversation. Participants shared personal anecdotes, debated policy proposals, and brainstormed solutions to bridge the gap between accountability and respect. By the end of the evening, attendees left feeling hopeful that common ground could be found, even if Bondi and Leavitt themselves weren't ready to meet halfway. Years later, when historians looked back on the incident, they recognized it as a pivotal moment in the evolution of the legal system. It forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and fairness, sparking conversations that transcended individual opinions. While the verdict may have provided closure, the real impact lay in the discussions it inspired, discussions that challenged assumptions and encouraged critical thinking. The courtroom clash between Bondi and Leavitt may have ended, but its legacy endured as a testament to the enduring struggle to balance authority with advocacy in the pursuit of a fairer society. What ultimately emerged from the saga was a renewed appreciation for the fragility of trust in institutions. People realized that justice required not only adherence to rules, but also compassion, humility, and adaptability. The confrontation between Bondi and Leavitt served as a reminder that no system was perfect, but also that imperfections could be addressed through honest reflection and collective effort. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale or a catalyst for change, the case underscored the enduring challenge of balancing authority with advocacy in the pursuit of a fairer society. And though the players moved on with their lives, the lessons they left behind continued to resonate, shaping the way people thought about justice for years to come. Years after the courtroom drama between Judge Susan Leavitt and attorney Michael Bondi had faded from headlines, its impact lingered in ways that no one could have foreseen. The case became a benchmark for discussions about accountability, fairness, and the delicate balance of power within the legal system. It served as both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration, reminding people that justice was not just a matter of rules but also a reflection of shared values. As time passed, the story took on new dimensions, evolving into something far greater than the sum of its parts, a symbol of humanity's ongoing struggle to reconcile authority with advocacy. For Michael Bondi, the years following the ruling brought a mix of vindication and introspection. Though he continued to champion judicial reform, his approach softened over time. He began focusing less on personal grievances and more on systemic issues, working with lawmakers and advocacy groups to draft policies aimed at increasing transparency in courtrooms. His fiery speeches gave way to thoughtful dialogues, where he encouraged collaboration rather than confrontation. Bondi often joked that age had mellowed him, but those close to him knew it was more than that. It was a recognition that progress required patience and compromise. Still, there were moments when his old defiance resurfaced, especially during heated debates about judicial ethics. In those instances, he reminded everyone why they had admired him in the first place: his unwavering commitment to challenging injustice. Bondi's family, too, found a sense of peace as he embraced this new chapter. His wife, who had once worried about the toll his crusade would take, now stood proudly beside him at events celebrating his contributions to legal reform. Their children, now young adults, began to see their father not just as a controversial figure but as someone who genuinely cared about making the world better. They joined him in some of his advocacy work, organizing workshops and campaigns aimed at educating communities about their rights. These efforts strengthened their bond, transforming what had once been a source of tension into a shared mission. For Bondi, watching his children carry forward his ideals was perhaps the greatest reward of all. Judge Leavitt, meanwhile, spent her retirement years quietly, yet purposefully. She rarely spoke publicly about the case, preferring instead to focus on mentoring the next generation of legal professionals. Her home became a gathering place for aspiring judges and lawyers eager to learn from her experiences. Over cups of tea, she shared stories, not just about the infamous courtroom incident, but about the countless other cases that had shaped her career. She emphasized the importance of humility, urging her mentees to remember that behind every decision lay real lives affected by their choices. Though she never explicitly apologized for her actions during the confrontation, she did express regret for any harm caused, acknowledging that even the most well-intentioned decisions could have unintended consequences. The broader legal community underwent significant changes inspired by the case. Courts across the country adopted reforms aimed at improving transparency and accountability. Judges received training on conflict resolution, learning how to address disputes without resorting to extreme measures. Contempt laws were reevaluated, with clearer guidelines established to ensure penalties aligned with offenses. These changes reflected a growing understanding that maintaining order required not just strict enforcement, but also empathy and communication. Lawyers, too, adapted, striking a balance between zealous advocacy and respectful conduct. The case had taught them that winning arguments wasn't worth sacrificing trust in the system. In popular culture, the story of Bondi and Leavitt remained a rich source of inspiration. Artists continued to reinterpret the events through various mediums, each adding their own perspective to the narrative. A critically acclaimed film dramatized the courtroom showdown, capturing the emotional intensity of the moment while exploring the motivations driving both characters. Critics praised the movie for its nuanced portrayal of complex issues, noting how it avoided casting either side as purely right or wrong. Similarly, a best-selling novel wove elements of the case into a fictional storyline, using it as a backdrop to explore themes of power, morality, and redemption. Through these creative works, the legacy of Bondi and Leavitt lived on, reaching audiences far beyond those who had witnessed the original events. Back in Florida, the courthouse where the incident occurred became a site of reflection. Visitors often paused near the bench where Judge Leavitt had presided, imagining the dramatic scene that had unfolded years earlier. Staff members occasionally recounted the story to newcomers, emphasizing the lessons learned about professionalism and decorum. Yet, there was also a sense of pride in how much had changed since then. The courtroom now operated with greater efficiency and fairness, thanks in part to reforms sparked by the controversy. People entering the building couldn't help but feel a renewed faith in the possibility of improvement, even in institutions as entrenched as the judiciary. For the public, the case remained a touchstone for conversations about justice and morality. Social media users regularly referenced it in debates about current events, drawing parallels between past controversies and present challenges. Educators incorporated it into lesson plans, encouraging students to think critically about the role of authority in society. Community leaders used it as an example of how conflicts, no matter how divisive, could lead to meaningful change if approached constructively. These discussions highlighted the universality of the issues at stake, transcending individual opinions to focus on shared aspirations for fairness and equality. Ultimately, the legacy of the courtroom clash between Bondi and Leavitt transcended its origins. It became a reminder that justice was not static but dynamic, shaped by the collective efforts of individuals striving to make it better. The case underscored the importance of questioning authority without undermining it, advocating passionately while remaining respectful, and seeking accountability without resorting to vengeance. It challenged people to consider the kind of world they wanted to live in, one governed by rigid rules or guided by principles of compassion and integrity. Decades later, when historians looked back on the incident, they recognized it as a turning point in the evolution of the legal system. It forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and fairness, sparking conversations that transcended individual opinions. While the verdict may have provided closure, the real impact lay in the discussions it inspired, discussions that challenged assumptions and encouraged critical thinking. The courtroom clash between Bondi and Leavitt may have ended, but its lessons endured as a testament to the enduring struggle to balance authority with advocacy in the pursuit of a fairer society. And though the players moved on with their lives, the values they represented continued to shape the way people thought about justice for generations to come.